Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tuesdays with Mitch. I'm your host and fellow paralegal here at Proner and Proner Emmeline. Today, we have Mitchell Proner, as always, a personal injury attorney of over 30 years of experience fighting for people's rights. How are you, Mitchell?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing, Emily?
I'm good. We missed you in the office.
Yeah, how's it?
Last week we had a pre-recorded video. What were you up to this past week?
So it was very interesting. Basically, there was a group of professors from Colorado, professors from Cornell in New York, and attorneys from all over the country got together in Madrid, Spain, and we're talking about big data in predicting jury outcomes. And basically, if there was a study, let's suppose we wanted to do a study on a certain case. If you presented that study, you want to get it published, and you had 15 people that looked at the empirical question presented. Empirical question is one that can be looked at, and with data, you can come up with an answer. If you had an empirical question, you had 15 people look at it, and a professor wrote about it. He said 15 people looked at it, so this is the predicted outcome. That wouldn't be statistically valid. Now, if you had 75 people that participated in that study, and they were all graduate students at a university, that still wouldn't be a proper study. But if you got random people and the sample was large enough, and you had a double blind, meaning some people were a control group and some people were actually aware that they're in the study, and you had controls and randomization and a large enough sampling, well, then you could have valid results in terms of statistical validity with standard deviations. And what these data scientists are doing is they're looking at real cases and doing predictive studies and then looking at the jurors' outcomes and seeing how valid their data is. And they're finding correlations that lawyers like me can use to predict the value of a case rather than just talking to your partner or your wife or somebody else in the office saying, "What do you think this case is worth?" And it was pretty interesting. Some
That
very interesting speakers and very informative. It was from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock for 3 days, and picked it in Spain just because why not? Actually, one of the data scientists and his wife live in Spain, so they hosted the event.
that sounds really cool, and I hope you had a great time. But it's great to have you back in office and back to our scheduled programming. Today, we have a great topic for you guys. We're going to be speaking about what evidence do I need, or you, the plaintiff, what evidence is needed to win a car accident case.
So
So, Mitchell,
it's a
let's
good question.
let's jump right in. What are the most important types of evidence to win a car accident case?
So first off, you used an interesting word that people might have heard before, and maybe they don't know, maybe they do know. You're aware of it because you work in our office. You use the word plaintiff. In a typical lawsuit, there's a plaintiff and a defendant. A plaintiff is the one that brings the complaint, says something happened to me. A defendant says, no, we didn't do anything. They defend the claim. So the plaintiff, typically in a personal injury case, would be the accident victim, would be the individual that got injured. And what proof would you want if you're a plaintiff that is the victim of an auto accident? Well, there are two aspects to every personal injury case. One aspect is liability and who's at fault, and the other aspect is damages. What were the injuries sustained, if any? Now, sometimes we'll get called and people will want to know whether or not they have a case, and they'll say, I had an accident. I was in my car and I got hit in the rear by this driver, and I think they were drinking, and it was 100% their fault. And they said they were sorry. They said they were sorry. and I want to know if I have a case. And that's only half of the picture because we naturally have to ask them, well, what happened to you? And they might say, I could have died. We say, okay, thank God you're fine and you didn't die. But what happened to you? And without damages, there's no case. You need to have somebody at fault and you need to have damages. So the proof you need in a case will be proof that helps you to prove liability, that is, who's at fault, and damages, meaning what injuries, if any, were sustained. Now, typically, somebody might say another vehicle is completely at fault. They ran the red light, for example. Well, the other vehicle might say, no, I had the green light. Then it's a common occurrence. There's a question of lights. Now, somebody might be convinced that the other vehicle ran the red light, but to prove a personal injury case, you need to prove a mere preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not. So if you have scales, right? Everybody's seen perhaps the lady holding the scales of justice. If you have scales like a balance, it's got to be just enough to tip the scales. So that could be the weight of a piece of paper, but that's the weight of the evidence tips the scales. It's got to be more likely than not. That's a mere preponderance. So if both vehicles say, I had the green light, you might not be able to tip the scales. But if you have a video, maybe there's a gas station on the corner and that gas station has cameras. That's actually a real scenario that we had in one of our cases. And we were able to use the gas station video to prove fault. Now, the thing is this. Those videos from stores and surveillance around, typically, they're on a 48 to 72 hour loop where they start to re-record themselves. So if you don't get an investigator out there right away, and it's funny, we got the nice lady who takes care of cleaning her office behind you, and she's part of our show. This goes to show you this is live. We're not staging this in any way whatsoever. This is live, and we do this just for you. So if for example, we had a case where there was a video that could prove liability, but without proof of damages, you still don't have a case. So proof of damages, for example, would be an ambulance report, hospital records, doctor's records, and those records are actually admissible as evidence. Now, if somebody says, yeah, but I'm in tremendous pain and my neck and back and my knee and my shoulder hurt, I should get something for that. Without a doctor, you don't have proof that you sustained injuries. Medical records, by court rules, the CPLR, which is Civil Practice Law and Rules, which are the rules of evidence, are in there. They say hospital records are admissible as evidence. Medical records are admissible, but you need a doctor to testify typically to what's presented in the medical records. And you need to prove causation and damages. Sometimes a client will say, we have a real client. She got into an accident. She was on a train, got hurt, ended up getting back surgery. And we wanted to claim the back surgery was part of the case. But when we got the records, it turned out the doctor didn't mention anything about the train accident. He mentioned long-standing problems with back pain from degenerative conditions, which are from aging. So even though she got the surgery after the accident, without a doctor saying the surgery was causally related to the accident, you don't have proof. So typically, in an automobile case, you need to prove liability, that's who's at fault, and damages.
Now, unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's their first time getting injured and they're not sure what the best thing for them to do. Luckily for you guys, if you're watching, that's why it's very important to stay in tune with our show or any of our posts to stay informed. Um, what's the first thing a victim should do to preserve evidence in a car accident case?
Well, the most important thing after a car accident case is figure out if you feel okay. Your adrenaline might be pumping. And if you have any concern that you might be injured, you should get yourself checked out. A lot of times, people don't feel the full effects until the next day, then they might be sore all over. But the most important thing is if you have any concerns about your health and well being, you call an ambulance. Don't worry about the bills. Any competent attorney can get those bills paid for you. If you have a car accident, don't worry about the bills. If you believe you've sustained injuries, you should get yourself checked out. That's the most important thing. More important than any money I could ever get someone as a result of an accident, worry about your health. Because money, you can have it today, you can lose it tomorrow, you can get it again the next day, but your health can be forever. You might be injured and recover, that's no big deal, but it could be permanent. And maybe early intervention can make a big difference. So, one of the things I've learned over years of practice is, unfortunately, sometimes people get brain injuries, and the brain can be damaged, and you might not know it immediately. It might be within days you realize your memory's not the same, or your sleep patterns change, or your mood changes, because you have chemical reactions in your brain, synapses, neurons that fire, that shoot chemicals. That's how our brains work. And the chemistry of your brain can be changed. But they find with what's called neuroplasticity that the brain can recover from an injury, but oftentimes immediate care and treatment and rehabilitation makes a difference in a long-term outcome. So if you have any question of any injury sustained, you should get yourself checked out. But beyond that, people, everybody, it used to be just some people, but just about everybody, people that are in the country one day because they come from another country, everybody's got a cell phone, and everybody's cell phone has a camera. Now, people oftentimes say, there was a hit and run. They asked me if I was okay. They took off. I didn't get their names. I thought I was okay. First thing to do, take out your camera and get a photo of the other vehicle. Get a photo of the plate. So if they don't stick around, at least you got proof of who was involved in the incident. Because believe it or not, hit and runs are more common than you realize. And you might be talking to someone and say, yeah, give me your license and registration. Next thing you know, they take off and you didn't get their license plate. So that's the first thing. Then, of course, if they give you their documents, can I see your license and registration? Take a photo of it. You don't have to write it down. Take a photo of the registration, and you're entitled to it by law. If the police come, and typically if you call an ambulance, the police will show up. But you can call 911 and say you had an accident, the police will be there. Give them your version of how the incident occurred, and be sure to tell them what the other vehicle did wrong. You don't need to worry about telling them what you might have done wrong. The other side can say that. You're under no obligation whatsoever to tell them what you did wrong. An admission against interest is always admissible in court. It's an exception to hearsay. So think of the open mouth insert foot rule. You don't need to do that. But it is beneficial to you if you're aware what the other vehicle did wrong to tell the police officer that. So now, You got the license plate, you got the registration, you got the insurance, you took photos, you told the police officer what's wrong. You might want to take photos of any damage that you see to the vehicles. It can't hurt. Now, if all the damage is to your front end and to the other vehicle's rear end, probably you're at fault for the accident, and no amount of photos is going to make your case a good case. You're going to know if you're at fault for the accident on most occasions. But if you believe the other vehicle's at fault and there's some damage or skid marks or evidence of where it occurred, what lane the incident occurred in, if it's a crossover or you were in the crosswalk and you're a pedestrian, take out your phone and take videos and take cameras, and don't just take one. You're not paying to develop the film anymore. It doesn't cost you more to take 20 photos. And typically it doesn't take very long. And most of us are pretty good. Let me take a selfie. Well, instead of a selfie, go click, 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 click. And it could help you. So that's number one. At the hospital, if you have sustained injuries, tell them everything that's bothering you. There's a phenomenon called masking. And it's a recurrent phenomenon. What might be is your shoulder hurts a little bit, but your neck is killing you. And the next day, your neck's okay. And your shoulder's okay. But your knee that you weren't even paying attention to, now it's terrible. And you start hobbling around. And next thing you know, you get your knee checked out. Next thing you know, you're getting a surgery. And the insurance company doesn't want to pay you for the knee injury because you didn't complain about it at the hospital. So do an inventory from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, from your neck to the tips of your fingers, and anything that bothers you. Headache, dizziness, nausea, shoulder aches, wrist aches, hand pain, back pain, neck pain, knee pain. If it doesn't bother you, thank God. That's the most important thing. Your health's the most important. But if it does bother you, tell someone. Let them take a look at it. And that could make a difference in the amount of recovery that you get when it comes to compensation for real injuries that you attribute to the accident. But they were masked a little bit by more pain in another part of your body. Well, just tell them everything that bothers you so they can look at it. Beyond that, if you're sustaining ongoing pain or limitation of motion, get yourself looked at. Some therapy might make you feel better, and that's more important than a claim. But if it doesn't make you feel better, at least you have medical records that your lawyer can use to increase the value of your claim. And it's not something that you're not entitled to. The law provides if you've sustained damages, you're entitled to all the compensation the law provides, but it only happens if you have proof, and the medical records are your proof.
Now, let's say the accident isn't clear right away. What happens? What if the details aren't clear in the accident right away? Is there anything that the client can do?
That's just about every case in my office. When an accident happens, the client comes in with a story. Oftentimes, the story's wrong. We'll get evidence in and we'll say, look, I know you thought it happened that way, but here's evidence that we've obtained. We look at this video. And oftentimes people, they're shocked. They're like, I can't believe this. I remembered it differently. And this is them speaking to me. I'm their lawyer. I'm on their side. The case might be better than they thought or worse than they thought, and they didn't even know. Which is another good reason not to give any statements to any insurance carriers until you've been prepared by your attorney. Because insurance carriers are big businesses that make their money by collecting as much as possible in premiums and paying out as little as possible in claims. The insurance company, when they call you up and they say to you, yeah, we just want to get a recorded statement to help you get your claim processed, to get you the payment you're entitled to. They're not recording it so they can pay you as much money as possible. They're recording it to find out their exposure, to find out how to limit their exposure and pay you less money that you may be entitled to. Even if it's your own carrier, they could be in an adversarial position to you because your own insurance carrier might be paying if it's an uninsured motorist claim. Or if there's two vehicles, they want to see if they don't have to pay the other vehicle. But they're not concerned about paying you, they're concerned about their well being. So you can tell them, I'll gladly give you a statement. You just have to clear it up with my lawyer. And then your lawyer can make sure you're not giving any statement out without proper preparation. Do you think if Bill Gates or Elon Musk had to give testimony under oath in a lawsuit, they wouldn't be prepared by their attorneys? Of course, they would be prepared. And you have the same rights. You don't have to pay a lawyer, typically in a personal injury case, unless they're successful. And then they get paid a percentage at the end of the case. So you should take advantage of that. Get that lawyer to prepare you before giving a statement to any insurance carrier. And you should certainly have the benefit of having your attorney show you any evidence that might be out there that might affect the way your case is viewed, because that can help you to win your case.
That's why it's extremely important for everyone to be well represented by a trustworthy attorney, trustworthy and honest attorney. And luckily, if you're in the state of New York, then we're here to help you if you ever need any help. But before we move on, I do want to remind everybody that we are live most Tuesdays, if not all Tuesdays, at 6 p.m. If you have any questions or concerns about an accident that you've already had or a case you already have with a current attorney and you aren't getting your questions answered, please feel free to contact us at 1-800-321-1234. We're always here and happy to help you guys figure out your case or representing you honestly. So now, Mitchell, what kinds of evidence might not be obvious at first, but can be uncovered later by experts or by investigators?
Okay, so typically an investigator can find witnesses that might not present themselves at the scene, or perhaps presented themselves at the scene but didn't give a full statement. So, for example, we had a case in Connecticut. It was a slip and fall and snow and ice, and there was a discrepancy about where the accident happened. The owners of the housing facility claimed that our client said she fell on the steps, which had been cleared by her husband. Our client said she fell in the parking lot, which wasn't adequately cleaned by the facility. We had three kids that happened to be playing in the driveway near where the incident occurred, and they presented as witnesses, and our investigator got statements from them, and that was effective in getting our client the settlement that she deserved. So an investigator can get witness statements, and those are often helpful. And an investigator can get surveillance videos, and that can help to prove a case. An investigator can determine the owner of a premises where an incident occurred, and that can be helpful. So an investigator can get the proof that oftentimes can win a case. Additionally, if it's close enough in time, an investigator can get photos of the accident scene, which typically can be admissible as long as the victims can say that that's a fair and accurate representation of what the area looked like immediately after the accident, or during the accident, or before the accident, depending on the photos and what they depict.
Okay, so great. I know that earlier you mentioned how sometimes when an accident happens, when a car accident happens, that some people might go ahead and say what they have done wrong in the accident instead of focusing on what the other person had done wrong. If the police report, in that case, if the police report has a mistake that makes it look like I or the victim was at fault, can they still win their personal injury case?
Typically, the police officer's findings are not admissible in a court of law unless they saw the incident. But a police report can have an admission, and that would be oftentimes admissible. So, for example, the police officer could say, based upon where the vehicles were, I determined that this vehicle was going faster and they're at fault for the accident. Unless that police officer is trained in accident reconstruction and did an actual accident reconstruction, which most police officers arriving at the scene aren't accident reconstructionists and don't do accident reconstructions. That only happens typically in a fatality or a case with catastrophic injuries. Then they call in a special team. Typically, the police officer's findings are not admissible. But if you tell a police officer, I only had 2 or 3 beers, and he writes that in the report, it's an admission against interest, and that can be admissible. So depending on what you say to the police, it might or might not be admissible. But oftentimes police reports have errors, and I have had police officers that I've cross-examined on the stand, and in one case is despite negative police reports. So a good attorney can oftentimes deal with problems in police reports, but they can be problematic in getting you an early settlement, because the insurance adjuster, even though that might not be admissible in a court of law, could look at it and say, we're not paying on this. The police officer says your client's 100% at fault.
Right. Okay. So I just want to remind everybody, follow us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You never want to miss out on the next informative video. We're here live every Tuesday. And if you miss us, then you can still catch our recordings on YouTube. Mitchell, do you have anything else to add on to today's segment?
Just thank you so much, Emmeline, for hosting the program. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And hopefully it was informative.
Yes. Stay tuned for next time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
My name is Demetrios Vasilakis. So I was at a stoplight and somebody rear-ended me. I didn't feel anything, but then after a certain amount of time, I started feeling pain in my lower back. I knew somebody who knew somebody, so then that's how we got connected to Proner and Proner. My first impressions about Proner and Proner were very good. I looked, the reviews online, and a lot of people were pleased with the service, so I decided to go with Proner and Proner. The process, dealing with accidents is always, very stressful, but they were always with me, every point of the way. They made it easier for me, I feel very pleased with the results, and I would recommend the attorneys to friends and families and relatives too.